I would like to thank our platinum sponsors, Set Technology Together. I would also like to thank our other sponsors, UBC Sauder School of Business, Continuing Business Studies, Watermark Learning, and Technical Safety BC. Okay. So Keith has requested that I don't simply just read his bio, but say some interesting points about him, such as he is our local hero, a true BA profession by heart, and he loves renovation and golfing. Uh, he's also mentioned that he's very handsome, as we can see through the picture that's being shared today with us. We also have Reethu Tom with us. It's going to be an interactive session. Reethu is a fellow volunteer at IIBA, and she has been certified in CBDA and AAC. She's here today to share a few of her findings while she was working with Max Marketing Enterprise. And I'm not going to say anything else, Keith. As I promised, I'm going to let you wow our audience
Thank you
tonight.
so much. Look,
Thank you.
I am not going to hear the end of this from Susan. I think this is a brilliant introduction, and kind of do the just enjoy and have fun. I think this is fantastic. Let me just share my screen, and I'm going to pull up here. Can everybody see the slides?
Not yet.
Hang on. There we go. Think of that as the big reveal. Okay. So I appreciate the opportunity to come out and enjoy some time and talk. Just a little note, everybody's to look at people and talk to you, I have to look over here at the other screen. That's the problem with virtual, right? You're looking over and talking to them, but you're not actually looking at the camera. So today, it's so much about you. It's about Vancouver. It's about the local heroes in Vancouver that are in business data analytics. It's a market space that's huge. It's about $250 billion, right? So when you think about it as one of the largest emergent market spaces out there, and if you quickly point to the person on your right, if you just do that, okay, quickly point to the person on your right, there he's over there, okay? See that person over there? If it's not you and it's not the person on the left, and it's that person on your right who's in business data analytics, because about 1/3 of our community is involved in this as a market space. So it's pretty big, right? Can I just do a quick, just use the chat. Have you been doing anything? Have you been doing business analysis work in business data analytics? Anybody here that's in Vancouver? Just use the chat, give me your name, okay? Because I'm gonna come back to you guys, and because this is really about the local community, right? Talking about Vancouver, because a lot of people are involved in this area. I know Reethu is, absolutely. Susan's been doing a ton of work in this area with my organization. Holly's been doing some work in this area. I'm gonna start making up names in a minute. Susan knows that I do that. But put them in there, because this is a participative conversation, and so much of this is just sharing some ideas. And so for me, I'm going to cover off some of the research. I'm not sure how many people know me. It's one of those cases. I'm the Chief Engagement and Growth Officer for IBA. I have built and sold a business analysis company, so I come from the industry. And in fact, it's my largest project was running modernization of unemployment insurance tax and benefit systems for a consortium of states. That's 300 stakeholders running through the meetings. You can imagine how much fun that was, right? The requirements documentation about this thick when you go through something like that. But it's to me, it's a profession that, we've seen it go through so many waves and stages, right? Of people and technologies that have come and gone, and different techniques that have come and gone, right? But always through everything is this focus in on business need, right? Really understanding value, really understanding business need, and making change, right? Like that's what we do as a profession. It's how do we enable change? How do we enable people to be successful? And we get asked some of the weirdest questions, right? Like as a profession, we get, like people come with very abstract problems, and it's our job to help bring clarity to these abstract situations. And that's really what the situation is. This is what this presentation is about. It's about Reethu taking that core business analysis, understanding, and capability and say, how do I apply this to business data analytics not because I'm a data scientist, not because I come from that world, but because I'm a great business analysis professional. And that's what I want to talk about today. Does that sound like a good conversation? All right, so it's not about me, it's not about the data, it's about success, right? And how we achieve that success. And by the way, if you don't start getting more interactive, I'm going to make it more interactive. We're going to start calling on people like Ian because he was chatty earlier today. So we're going to go through. For the newer members that may not know this, Ian, okay, because I'm going to pick on you just for a minute. It's really about leading that business analysis community, but there's 30,000 members and certification holders globally. Some of you may not realize 120 chapters in 40 countries around the world, right? That's a very large footprint, but we're all members of all of those chapters, right? So it may be that you're really interested in the BA Cafe in Brussels. It may be that you want to do brews and beers in the UK. It may be that you want to attend an event because there's something really interesting going on in Australia. Being a member of IBA means you're part of a global professional community. And I just want to emphasize that. It's that single sign-on, use your membership, participate, go onto the chapter website. And Holly, your team in Vancouver is doing some fantastic stuff. So kudos. And to all of the volunteers that are part of this, 1,300 volunteers are what power the organization, right? So kudos to everybody who's participating in this. We do have 600 corporate academic institutional partners. And one of the things that I'm going to spotlight tonight is that CBDA. How many people here, other than Reethu, have your CBDA? Pop it in the chat over there because that's the business data analytics one. And it'll come up over the course of the conversation tonight, right, as we go into this. But because it's important in terms of the success in a market. It's like in Agile, AAC, knowing how to practice in that context. I want to just, Jay, to everybody, thank you. You're a candidate. Fantastic. Jay, I'm planning on it. Good for you. That's fantastic. Methodology, because I'm with a whole group of business analysis professionals, I think the first thing that you're going to ask if I present you some data is to say, well, where's this data coming from? Can we agree on that? Doubting Thomas is right. Where is this data coming from? Show me the data. So I'm going to show you the value of our profession from a survey that we did, where we quantified what that impact is of business analysis in this world of business data analytics. And there was 300 respondents, 70% of them are director and above, and all of the companies had more than 500 employees. So this looks a lot like what people work for today, right? And again, I apologize, I'm looking to the right rather than straight at the camera because everybody's faces are over here. But interesting, right? Like this is where this data is coming from. So what we really want to get into is looking at the value of the profession. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things. One is the impact of business data analytics on today's business. Like, what's this really all about? I want to drill into how critical this role is. Like, how critical is business analysis as a profession and a role in being data driven, right? And I may even drag Susan into some of that conversation as well. And then we get this practical example of talking the research findings and getting into Reethu's experiences, because, I think that's where we got to spend most of our time is if we walk through an example and say, like, let's practically look at how not only this data on the screen, but how did Reethu use this as she was going through and doing max marketing? I mean, that to me is where rubber hits the road, right? It's that usability, that practicality as we're out and doing engagements and things like that. Does that make 2 thumbs up? Good. Turn your cameras on. Give me the thumbs up. Yeah, come on. Because I'm going to come back to that thumbs up a little bit. I can't, anything other than see you, right? So let's talk about the impact of data analytics on today's business and that need to become data driven. Would it surprise you if I said 75% of executives want their company to be data driven? Would that surprise anybody? No. Okay. It's cool when you turn your cameras on, I can see it. I can watch the heads go back and forth. 80% of businesses also believe that their business will be disrupted over the next 2 years because of business data analytics. There's a whole set of things around this that are critically important, right? And part of this is really twofold, right? One is this whole issue of how do I it's no longer about gut, it's about the facts. And it's about driving those facts down lower and lower into the business, because that's where the action has to happen. If I give, Sean the facts and Sean is able to make business decisions, I don't need to escalate them to the point where experience makes the decision. I can enable Sean to be empowered, right? That's part of what business analysis professionals do. We empower the organization, right, to make decisions, to enable those decisions. That's part of it, right? The company then acts faster, right? It's more agile, to use a wrong word, but it is the word, right? The second part of this is the data then drives the enterprise, right? The data is actually making decisions on its own in an enterprise to some extent, right? When you think about it, because we've become almost a segmentation of one. If I'm going to pick on a random name, Nina. If I'm Nina, sorry, again, she's over here. If I'm Nina and I'm shopping, okay? I'm assuming Nina shops. Yes? Okay. I expect as Nina that every single thing I'm offered is relevant to me, right? I expect it has relevance to my status in life, possibly my wealth. It's kind of creepy because it seems to have followed me whenever I'm shopping for something, and I'm always offered that same thing, a bed or whatever, right? Everything is related to who I am as an individual, because everything's segment of one these days. Business data analytics, when you think about this, is driving. If I'm a retailer anywhere these days, this thing is front and center to me. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go to some of the facts on this, right, just so people know it. Let's talk first and foremost about this idea of, as you start getting into it, it's the seeing is believing. And there's so much real excitement because we don't know where business data analytics as a market will really go, right? People remember the kind of internet coming in and e-commerce right around the year 2000, things like that. When you think about it, everybody was saying, e-commerce is going to change the way we shop, right? Oh, this is going to be such a huge thing. Everybody's going to be online in the next 2 years, right? That's a prime example of people overestimating the amount of change in the short term and underestimating the amount of change in the long term. The internet. Could we, back in the year 2000, have predicted SaaS as a market space? Could we have predicted cloud computing? Could we have predicted the pervasive effect of social media and all these other constructs that are built on it? No way, right? The transformation over 20 years in our society has been pervasive. Here's the funny bit. Business data analytics is backed by $200+ billion in expenditure. The internet and e-commerce was backed by a teeny fraction of that in spending back then. So imagine how big this could be over time. We're at the beginning of potentially a sea change in technology and the way we do business. So what is it in terms of business data analytics? Is this interesting so far? Thumbs up, cool. Yeah, okay. So again, this is something where there are types of business data analytics. There is an amazing enablement package that Susan helped us put together that went out to the chapter leadership. Okay, and it breaks down what are all these things, and it breaks down the types of systems that are involved. So like if you're ever in a situation where you need to explain this, or you need to do a little bit of data literacy kind of one-on-one with some companies and things like that, this is a really handy way of looking at it, because it's not data sciencey, So let me just tell you what some of these are. Like descriptive analytics is about historical stuff, like data mining, business intelligence systems, the traditional, what happened in the business. Think grids of numbers that happened, right? And then you've got the diagnostic stuff, which is like the segmentation. You're looking at the root cause analysis. That's where you're starting to look at the trend line and these kind of basic things. You're detecting something, right? Does that make sense? Cool. Yeah. And then you go into predictive. Predictive is about forecasting. It's almost like you're combining the historical data with the ability to detect stuff, and then you're going to forecast what's going to happen in the future, right? Fairly basic. That makes sense? So as a segment, it's just this is a really easy way of starting to explain things to people, right? And then you're going from there into prescriptive, and this is where you get into machine learning systems and you get into neural networks. So machine learning is actually fairly easy to explain. It's like you're throwing in a bunch of patterns of data that says this is a true, like here's a case, here's true. And then you throw a bunch of patterns of data that says this is false, and these are anomalies. And then you let the machine, if you throw in enough patterns of good, bad, and ugly, you get the ability to rate somebody's credit. Okay, Like you're throwing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds or thousands of scenarios of something that's good or something that's bad. So fraud detection, classic example, right? Like these are credit card fraud because you see these kinds of, that's machine learning, right? And so you get into these advanced neural networks and things like that that are really about the ability to chat or buying systems or compliance systems, automated trading, okay, automated trading platforms, right? These are all the kind of same things. And then there's cognitive, which is not only is the system, it's a little spooky, but not only is the system using the data to learn and using the data to act, but it's using the data to learn. So now you're getting to, autonomous vehicles, right? You're into traffic operations, smart grids, all these other kinds of basic things that are around that. And that's like, it's have you ever heard or watched the Google Assistant speak to and book the restaurant? Like it's creepy. It's really funny to watch, but go see it because like the person's got pauses in their speech and everything, but it's like, it sounds like a real authentic person speaking. It's like, wow. But there's your future when you start thinking about the scope of what some of this is. But it starts with, what's the business question that we're actually asking and answer? What's the business value of that, right? You know what I mean? How do I adopt it? And that's, who does that in life, right? Who does that as a profession? That's us, right? That's our thing. So let's go through this and look at the quotes. And so 215 billion is going to be spent on this thing. Oh, and that's now, by the way. That's not in the future. That's now. That's scary, right? Okay, first of all, small economy, it's bigger than that, all right? So just think of that as relative scope, okay? I talked about the other ones, but the other big thing in here is the ROI and this stuff is fabulous. Like even if people are messing it up, it's still on average 30%. That's pretty big. And why are people doing this? Are really the goals down the right. So this is when you're with an executive and people are talking business data analytics, there's your standard set of things that you're thinking about, right? Okay, what are we trying to do with this? Are we trying to improve productivity? Are you really trying to improve revenue? Is this about agility and speed, like the speed with which we can react to something? Is this about process efficiency? What are we trying to accomplish with it? There's a standard set of questions that you could be asking. You know how you have to do the beginnings of that elicitation of what are we trying to do? Because nobody ever really knows, right? So these are the good ones to start with. And you know why the little asterisks are there? Of course you don't, because you haven't got to the bottom of the screen yet. And that's because organizations that don't use business analysis professionals are actually far worse at those top three boxes, even though they're the most important ones. They're like 20% worse. Can you believe that? Because a huge impact our profession brings, because we can help to, as a profession, understand, well, what's involved in actually improving the productivity. It's one thing to have data, but it's another thing to action that, right? What's involved in actually improving revenue? It's one thing to have data, but are we asking the right questions so that people have the right analytic systems? Or else you end up spending $100 million. Like if you're a very large institution like a bank, your first $100 million in this area could be wasted because you're asking and answering the wrong questions. Is that cool? Make sense? Yeah. First of all, you probably all have your stories. Like some of you have lived and breathed this, right? Right? Because you've seen, like, how many of you have started a project that you've been assigned, and the fundamental question that they're asking is just wrong, right? The value that they're trying to get out of the darn thing was just wrong. You just type it in the chat. I've seen Robin, she's nodding over there. Okay, and I saw Susan, she was nodding, and I saw Reethu, you definitely nodding because we saw this one, right? But that happens in business data analytics, and it ends up being the highest source of failure, right? Now let's talk about the role of business analysis professional. Okay, so I want everybody to vote. This is the participation moment, okay? Scale of 1 to 10, okay, where 10 is you die a miserable death if you don't have a business analysis professional doing this, working and leading in a lead role. And 1 is you don't need them BAs, okay? 1 to 10, I want your vote in the chat. Where is business analysis? How important is it in terms of ROI and in terms of success on project? Give me your vote in the Q&A area, okay, in the chat. 8, thank you, Sean. 8, just because Holly says 9, don't give me a 9. Maybe it's because, hey, well, this guy wouldn't talk about it unless this is happening. We got a standardization around 8 and 9. 10, thank you, Kathy. 11, Susan, you're voting twice, that's cheating. You didn't think I'd see it. Reethu 10, awesome. 8.5, there's somebody who can't make a decision. Thank you, John. Nathan, okay, who are we missing here? Ian, I didn't see your vote. Where is it? Okay, I'm keeping track at this point in time. So you're right. There you go. Thank you, Don, Jay. It's actually a scale of 1 to 10. It's whoever said 11. We'll give that person there you go, Susan, because you watched the webinar before, right? So here's the funny thing. Okay, I want you to just take a minute and read this. This AB InBev, by the way, largest beer manufacturer in the world. So this is, and one of the funniest quotes from the project was, they make a lot of beer. You'd be really surprised at how much of it goes missing in a given year. It's like, wow, you're right. I get that. So we shifted the ways of work and organized and put a business analysis as part of the team and accountable for output. And they were critical as part of this journey. That's the resonant story, guys. Like, with over and over and over and over and over, it's like these things are going off the rails, and this is how we bring it back on the rails. So this is the heart of the story. This is the core. And I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you why and how. And so there's one slide here that's really the summary. So what happens is the executive does have to make a commitment to be data driven, because at some level you do need to make a cultural shift, right? The organization, and in Reethu, I mean, your story probably starts with the owner said, you got to do this. I'm going to bet on that one. And then, because that starts it, right? Go ahead and take your mic off. Yes, is that what happened?
Yes.
So in all of this, it's going to be that executive commitment, because there's this desire to use facts to make decisions, right? But then what happens is either the business analysis professional is integrated into the business and maintains the focus on value, or this thing drifts very, very, very badly. Okay, like that is, it's polarized at this point, because if the business analysis professional is not involved, the failure rate is actually 2.8 times higher. Okay, 2.8 times higher, not 2.8% times. That's like 280%, like huge. Okay, but when you do this and you orient on the farm, then a whole series of things happens. One is you get 190% more use of business analysis professional, and you get 27% better at these 6 things called BDA practices. And those are the ones that I want to diagnose with you and go through with Reethu, because that's the essence of the story. Those are 6 things that everybody on this call, if you focus in on it, if you get one of these things, it's thrown over the fence at you, there's your default, okay? And it's all in the Guide to Business Data Analytics, which is on our website. It's available to members. Just go up there onto the Knowledge Hub and you'll see it, okay? And you'll go through the thing. But you get 3 times better return if you do this, okay? So there's laggards and then there's leaders. The leaders use business analysis professionals and they focus on these 6 things. So as you are the leader doing this, 3 times ROI, 19% more focused on those top 3 things that we talked about. But chances are, because you're successful, it starts to lead toward this enterprise rollout, and it starts to lead, because it snowballs, right, toward more advanced analytics. The companies that are doing this are actually sustainably better and provably so. Does that make sense? Kind of a cool thing. Like the slide? Okay, so who here could actually show this to their boss? So this is actually the impact. Yeah. Thank you for raising your hand. I don't know how to pronounce it. Igila? Igila?
Igila.
You're my new favorite person, okay? So, okay, listen. We are in the business also of showcasing our value, right? Can we agree on that? As a profession, it's about also saying, look, here's how I can do this. Is important. We need to build skills in this area. This is really critical for the company. 75% of executives would say this is important to us. So this is a good case to go and help get the skills built in your organization. But where this really hits home for me is people think about business analysis. If I said, what are you doing on a project? And I just took a poll, right? What are you doing? People would probably gravitate to understanding, verifying, reporting results, right? As that's a business analysis task. But look at the difference, or you would probably gravitate to properly identifying the business problem. Would you agree on that? It's the bottom 2 that are typical when you think about business analysis. Would you agree with me on that? Okay. Here's the funny one, okay? It's the opposite. It's about changing culture. The leaders use business analysis capability to change culture. The leaders are using business analysis capability to influence decision makers and drive action. twice as much. The leaders are using business analysis to ensure accurate, quality, and accessible data twice as often. And what I mean by that is lead in that area. See, it's not about a business analysis professional being a data scientist. That's not what this is about. You have to have, you have to have data literacy and things like that, right? But it's not about that. It's about good business analysis capability, isolating that business problem, and then driving, because of that excitement. Say, yeah, this is how we're going to answer this question. This is what's important to the business. This is what's valuable to the business. And that's ultimately what drives good capability in this area. Does this surprise you, by the way, some of these things? This is pretty seminal. This is really, really important, because what we're connecting here is this connection between business analysis capability and building that as a foundational skill, a mature skill in our organization, and actually achieving the kind of cultural shift that an organization wants to achieve in this area. Ours is a critically important profession, right? Forget those finance guys. It's what we do that's important, okay? Oh, come on, at least I get a smile about somebody out of this one. Susan gave me, it's a dad joke, okay? Work with me. We're good with this? Any questions on this so far? In
Kind of neat. I mean, it speaks to the core competencies.
Yeah, I will absolutely speak to the core competencies. In fact, what we can do is we'll talk to the importance of each one of these things and walk them through, okay? There's the 6 of them here that are the underlying skills that we got to focus on. And Robin, if the execs aren't committed to being data-driven, there are some great thoughts in terms of how to bring them along, because part of this is just the success story as business data analytics projects execute, right? It's really the beginning of the success that connects for them, right? And Reethu has a great segue on that one. I don't want to steal her thunder on, okay? But it's a great question. Like it's so much of it is about, are we asking and answering the right question to kind of connect them? Let's talk about the essential skills, okay? Because this, I want to get through this, relatively quickly so that we can kind of spend some time and Reethu, take the time. But the essential skills here from a professional perspective is, it literally is 36% of business analysis professionals are involved, okay? So you haven't seen it yet, you're gonna see it probably within the next year, all right? Something. Statistically, it's probable, right? That everybody on this call will be faced with something in this area and need to execute. That makes sense? Would you agree with me on that? You're just gonna get thrown into the deep end. Hey, like I got a project, and you say, wow, that sounds like a business data analytics project Keith was talking about. That's why this is so important, because the more business analyst professionals are executing in this area, the better the skill base is, the more our profession we float up all boats, right? Agree with me on that one? And oh, by the way, it's a healthy area that gets paid a lot. So why not get your CBDA, right? This is a really important area. Reethu did that. So, and it's true that in any shift, right, from, you go back 20 years, AS400, now I'm showing my age, Susan, don't bug me about it. But you go back that many years, right? It was a different skill base than it is today. And so there are things like data literacy that are important. Not that you're trying to become or replicate a data scientist. That's not what this is about. It's about having certain skills and techniques that are associated with this market space, right? Executing in here. Like, how many people are now agile? Agile is what you're using. Okay. Angela? Yeah. Paula, thank you very much. I appreciate the hand up. Can we say that you're not using use cases? You're probably using user stories? Or, yeah. Okay. Different technique, right? Same stuff, same need, different technique. So you have to speak and use that set of techniques appropriate to the particular thing that you're working with, right? So that's what this is about, is making sure that we're using the right set of techniques, that we actually are data literate and we can understand what the data sources are and reconnect them back and et cetera, right? Some basics. But if you're not using business analysis in those areas, look what happens to the failure rate. Any questions as to how important this is? 2.8 times higher failure rate. That's just staggering. It's not led by business analysis professionals, led by business analysis professionals. Seems kind of simple to me, right? And I don't want to be facetious about it. It's more like there's a call to action, is that this desperate need to integrate the business analysis professional deeply into the business so you can articulate what is and focus people on value, right? That's what we have to do. And then it's building the necessary skills to fulfill the role, because to do this means that you know BDA, you know the business data analytics, and you know that background in that space and the roles and the things like that have to happen in here. Because what you don't want is a person who doesn't know this moving forward and failing. You don't want anybody failing as a professional. Let's talk about the 6 skills. These are the 6. And what's important in here for people is that you see the dark blue ones that are on the screen? Those dark blue ones, business analysis professionals in the leader organizations, they do them twice as frequently. So I want you to put your thought and say, those ones are really important for you to lead. And it's not that you're going to say, hey, I'm here to change your culture today, because that's not how it works, right? Like, you don't say, hey, okay, we're going to start a project this morning at 9 o'clock, and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to have a change culture. That's not what happens. It's the fact that the business analysis professional is deeply ingrained and trusted by the business that enables that. And there's a pathway to get there. And Reethu, we're going to walk through the story of how that happened. Okay. And to Robin's point, it was, how do I get the active engagement of the business? I want to focus a lot of time and attention on that. And, Robin, because you asked that question, I really want to focus in on how to deepen that. And Susan's probably going to have some great examples too. And then we get into, well, how do we identify the business question, understanding and verifying results, redesigning workflows? If you're not doing those things, okay, your failure rate, like what happens if you're not using business analysis professional, essentially the skill base in here falls dramatically, and therefore the failure rate goes way up. That's what happens. All right, so that's why those other ones are so critical. So, Reethu, I'm done talking. I'm going to pose a couple questions. And I want it, this is so much about Center Stage Vancouver, right? Like, it's people you should talk to, and amongst yourselves, share what's happening in your projects and map them to this architecture, okay? I'm just going to recircle the skills that we have here into a project format. And everybody, this is going to look suspiciously like the guide to business data analytics, okay? Different words, slightly, but it's effectively this, we had a mapping on the other slide, but people don't believe me sometimes, but you get the business problem that you're going to focus on first, active engagement of the business. Who's the candidate? It scrolled off the screen. Does this look like Guide to Business Data Analytics? It's basically the same thing, okay? So think of that as Guide to Business Data Analytics is the execution on the project. What we had to measure here was more about the value delivered. So there's a lot of different things. So what I want to do is to start at the beginning, and Reethu, let's walk through that first one around properly identifying what was happening. Why was the company not good at this stuff? What was going on and what was the demand? And then let's just walk it through at each of these pieces and see how it came together. Does that sound like a cool idea? Can we just cheer on Reethu as she's coming on stage here? Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much, Keith.
Yeah. And here's a great book to kick us off. Go ahead, Reethu.
So, so just to give a little background about Max Marketing, this is a supply chain enterprise in the port city of South India called Kochi. And they were in this space for close to 3 decades. And they offer their supply chain services to enterprises in the FMCG and consumer durable business. So I was onboarded as an internal business analyst. And because they were a process-intensive organization, I was entrusted with just studying their processes and just analyzing the bottlenecks, identifying what are the pockets for value improvement and such. So somewhere along the process, we hit this sort of a stumbling block where we realized we weren't probably doing things the right way, or certain things had to be recalibrated. And a lot of it pointed to us not having used the data that we generated. And so that's where I come to this first stage where we identify the business problem by identifying the right questions to answer. So the enterprise was not good at business data analysis. I mean, it was not something that they considered important, or from my experience, I also understand it is sometimes a lack of skill that makes the enterprise reluctant to take a step ahead in this direction. But our times are such that you cannot really, make an exit out of data, because that is where the truth lies, and that's where all the evidence is. So there's not much you can do without data anymore. So they always were sure of their problems, but they somehow did not agree to the fact that the solutions lied in analyzing that data. So just to make it more clear and more visible, we conducted an elaborate root cause analysis from where we identified that a lot of our problems with regards to our inventory and order management stemmed from the fact that we did not use our data. We never looked into our data enough so that we could get smart with our stocking decisions. So that was the main problem. We were just not efficient or optimal in our inventory or in our stocking decisions. So that being the key business problem, we set out to do a root cause analysis, and which is where we got like a clear picture of what the situation was. And from then on, I think the way the enterprise, especially the business owner, how they saw the idea, the practice of business data analytics had changed. So it changed to my benefit too. I mean, it was easier for me to take on from there the process of change. And I think BDA is more like a new perspective. It's almost like switching your lens to a new lens. So you will see clearly certain things. You might, things will make a lot more meaning when it is through the lens of BDA.
Do you have the group here? Do you have other questions on identifying that business problem and some of the changes that happened as a result for Reethu? Just pop them into the chat area. Like, to me, this is a discussion. We've got some great people here who have been involved in some of this stuff too. And if you have stories of what you saw, then pop them in and let's just discuss them as we go through. Because I think that's really where the value is so much of this is when you see it, what do you do, right? And in Reethu's case, that root cause analysis, Reethu, was brilliant to kind of step through and say, these are things that are happening all the time. And if we just spot that pattern of this thing happening, which causes the inventory shortage, we fix a business problem. And then what happened when that, the business all of a sudden gets engaged at that point, right? They began to say, this is actually really important. You found something unique here. You're right, we do need to go look for that, right? Susan, have you got your story in this area? Okay, sorry, Reethu, go ahead.
Oh, no. I just wanted to add on that what was discovered through the root cause analysis were problems that the team themselves had encountered on a day-to-day basis. So they were in complete agreement. They could relate to all of the problems listed. And that's where they had a little more faith in the initiative that I was rooting for.
And I know Susan's got a story she wants to share. I'm catching her off guard, though.
I do.
Yeah, go for it.
I didn't come with anything today.
Well, I'm coming back to you later, but I'm sure you can talk about, because see, Susan's done so much of the work inside IBA around understanding number value, right? And really digging down into some of these areas. So there might be something in there, just understanding what some of those key stories are.
Sure.
I'll raise my hand when I'm ready.
Okay, we're good. So Holly, what questions did you ask to identify the true business problems, and how do you identify the data to dig into in order to identify the root cause? Do you want to speak to that briefly, Reethu? Because it's really about value analysis, right? Yeah.
Sure. So questions that I asked to identify true business problems. So I was at this juncture when I was studying the process in the organization. There was some amount of insight that I had into the process. There were a few bottlenecks I had discovered. So there was sort of through light on what the key business problem was. And for how supply chains work, one problem kind of dominoes into many other problems, and it becomes a big ball of problems. And so that is sort of the situation that we had, like, because we weren't optimal with our stocking decisions, we suffered in other areas as well. We lost out to our competitors. Sometimes we had excessive costs in terms of transshipping, expediting. We lost out on many customer orders, and several such issues. They all somehow just pointed in the direction of a problem with stocking decisions. So that is how, I mean, I was lucky to have some amount of time to slowly snowball into the business problem. It sort of came to me than me going in search of it through my process. And the second part of the question. how did you identify data to dig into in order to identify the root cause? So I will be speaking about that as well as we go forth with the slides. So it was again with the business problem, what were the key attributes that contributed to the business problem, or rather, which were integral pieces of the whole puzzle. We sat together as a team. We had the business owner as well. So we sort of brainstormed on what could be the data pieces that we could put together, so that it will be a landscape that we can curate more out of.
Mm-hmm.
So just I know it is a rather vague answer, but I hope I can explain better as I go to the further slide. And also we have a question from Robin. What if the execs aren't committed to being data-driven? Thoughts on ways to bring them along? It is a big challenge, and sadly, I think we do have a slide that very well explains that bit. But any which ways, I was lucky that this was a small enterprise, so my team was small. The extent of activities were visible to everyone, so I feel to a certain extent it was easier to convince because everyone was on board. We did not have people who were disconnected from the processes. Everyone was equally at how the operations ran the enterprise. So that was a quicker buy-in that way.
I think as well, Reethu, just to add to your question, or it's so often, because it's business value realization, it's that spark of, well, if we had this, what does that mean we're able to do? What does the existence or absence of that answer enable the company to do, right? If we knew that, not receiving the confirmation from a customer means that we're not going to get paid in 120 days, you know how to take action on that, right? Oh, and oh, by the way, 90% of the time, this is what happens. And oh, by the way, this is what it means to the supply chain. Is that not only understanding the root cause, but what does that do to the value chain? When people connect those dots, they understand the business value of the answer, right? And that galvanizes, well, we can change this and we can change that. That makes sense? That's another thing that's like, Reethu, what I saw in your story that I thought was so fascinating was this, when you did the root cause analysis and then you presented it, what happened with the executive? They started going, okay, we need to do this. Talk about that story.
Oh, sure. Is it? Oh, sure. We're in the next slide. So yes, the root cause analysis, as Keith had just indicated, that's when there was a clear shift in the tenor. Everything had changed. So there was clearly more engagement from the team as well as from the business owner. They were all keen to contribute to the process, and that made it all the more better, because there would have been insights. In fact, there were insights that I did not know, that I did not have, that I overlooked while I analyzed the process, which a lot of things were brainstormed. It was more like a running workshop that the whole enterprise turned into, when we figured out that, hey, we have these set of problems, let's just work to fixing it. And there was a great amount of engagement at that state.
That's a great story. And it's so indicative of so many organizations, because it's about business value at the end of the day, right? And that's what we understand intimately. Let's go to the ensuring accurate, quality, accessible data, because that was really you that had to figure out, well, where's this data coming from, right? It wasn't a data science guy, it was you. You had to go figure this thing out.
Right. So it was our business problem that sort of created the boundaries for what data we were looking for, and what data sets we could borrow attributes from, and what we could piece together. This was again a team effort. This took a while. We got lost in between as well. I just feel it's a natural part of the process. And the hardest thing is to come back and sit with your business problem again, and figure out what are the attributes that drive your key metrics. And so this required some amount of thinking, but we came up with a bunch of attributes. Luckily for us, we had a lot of structured data. from all the transactions we had done. There was also our client enterprise that had like a data snapshot of ours. So we sort of had all the right pieces together, just that it took a little while for us to find the right attributes and curate that data blend of sorts. And so this point is where we gained a little more confidence with the whole process. And that was the kind of data sets that we used were the order data, the payment data, the customer master data, product variant data, and things like that. The kind of products we dealt with were electrical products. So we had a bunch of switches, wires, MCBs, lighting, fan, things like that, things that were prone to intermittent demand as well as seasonal demand. So we had a lot of just drama in the way products moved and they were demanded.
Yeah. And then from there, like what I heard in that story, which is so fascinating for me, is just that them working with you and understanding the data built confidence in what they're going to look at in the dashboard. So now all of a sudden the engagement gets even greater, right? They become even more vested in what this answer is and excited about getting the results. So it's this kind of flywheel of you uncovering value, you helping them realize that the data is here to realize that value. They have the understanding where this data is coming from, so they believe in it. Now you're into understanding, verifying, and reporting the results. Do you want to just talk through this relatively quickly and then?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah. So to understand, verify, report results, and fostering data literacy, this was a very exciting part of the whole journey. And we figured out quite a few answers to a bunch of questions that we had in regards to our business problem. And a few insights that we got were in relation to what products were understocked, what products were overstocked, what products usually went into the damaged category, what were the products which were prone to expiry dates and warranty issues. So we had a bunch of insights from there. We also could map a few data points, such as what category of customers frequently order what category of products, what time of the year. So we were trying to sort of, build a data map of sorts, and so that we could sort of forecast or see through the demand and make more intelligent stocking decisions. We also came up with interesting discount programs so that we could sort of take control over intermittent demand, sort of attract the certain customer bases, especially construction companies, to make bulk orders with us in a way that we could place orders ahead of time and ensure that they get what they want. And moving on to data literacy, I feel that is a gap of sorts. More, it's a very evident gap because my enterprise, especially, they weren't adept at data analytics. So it took a while, but I felt that the literacy sort of fell in as we went ahead through the process.
That's a great story. So we have two questions. One is, what happens if the data shows what's different than what is commonly believed? That's a great question, Holly. Wow. It's a great question, because a lot of times it's like we spend so much time defending where it comes from, but gosh, if they know the sources of the data, that's really helpful. I remember doing a project once. It was a transformation as we were doing a system conversion. And the executive of the company, in this insurance thing, property and casualty, said, under no circumstances can there be an invalid driver's license. And you can imagine there's a big difference between what I'll call tribal behavior and allowed behavior, or what is, and what we found when we were doing it was that there was this huge number of records with 0000000 as the driver's license. Can you imagine why? It's because the brokers were putting zeros in because it was the only way to get the system to spit out a quote when they didn't know the driver's license number. And so did they believe it? No. Because they didn't think it was part of the process. They thought they had governance around it. But when you walk through and they understood where it was coming from, and we were able to see that this was a whole series of policy violations were happening, they jumped on board and they said, okay, this is what we got to do. And they knew what was happening underneath because they had confidence in where this was coming from. And that's where, are we asking and answering the right business question, to what Reethu was talking about earlier? So fundamental. And then what is the data that leads us to this set of answers? Where is that coming from? It's the provenance of the data that tends to drive the confidence. But Reethu or Susan, you may have a different answer than that.
I
Good.
agree.
You would agree? Okay, we're good. Susan? Yeah, okay. Let's continue to step forward. And I saw another one, which is what types of jobs or roles or types of people helped you in your data journey. Reethu, do you want to talk to that briefly? And then I'll talk to what we see in the research findings as well.
So to help me, because I myself, I'm not extremely skilled as a data scientist, but where I pitched in was through defining the business context and identifying the problems which required solutions. So we had a data analyst intern because this was an experimental initiative at our organization. We did not want to like fully invest in something until we knew this is something. This is it. I mean, it took a while for the enterprise to accept it as a step in the right direction. So I had a data analyst intern to help me pick up the right data sets, piece them together, and make a curated blend that would make sense to our list of problems.
Yeah, that's like we're not trying to be data scientists ourselves, right? That's not what we do. And even sometimes data analyst, there's people in the technology team who do that, right? It's a different role. So it's this partnering between business analysis, the business itself, the line of business executives who really know where the value and the processes are that have to change, technology and data science. It's coming together, but it's orchestrated by the business analysis professional.
I do have a story now.
Yes, you do. Thank you.
How about this? And it's not becoming a data scientist that actually is kind of the starting point for this. And I think it's an important distinction. So internally at IIBA, we have had a data analytics project going on for quite some time. And so we've brought in a data scientist. We affectionately refer to him as Gary the data guy. And the great thing about Gary is that he's a PhD, and so he's kind of off talking about really important things. But the thing that Gary can't bring to IIBA is understanding our business processes, understanding the pieces of data, how we use the data. And so even as he's been coming in to help us make sense of all of that, we've got to have someone like Scott Bennett, who, he was at the Achieving More with Data. And, he was having to facilitate sessions. So here's an example. When we started to look across our data, we had different definitions of a member. Now think about that. That's really important. If we want to give you an accurate accounting of how many members we have, we should all have the same definition. But because we were using different systems to have that member data, member data was being put in based on different definitions. And so Scott had to work on a project. He had to pull together subject matter experts across those different systems and come to a consensus about what is the definition of a member, so that then Gary could take that the rest of the way. And I think that relationship that we've built with Gary over time has been really important, and it goes both ways because he's also giving us insights about what he's seeing, and we're able to put that back into the ways that we use and report on data. In fact, we're going to do a LinkedIn Live with Gary on February 16th because we want our community to understand that we are not asking for us to be data scientists. That's like a whole other kind of level of geekiness. And data scientists really rely on us to help them make sense of that. And so in that LinkedIn Live that we're going to do with them, we are going to talk about the ways that we work together, so that it's a little bit clearer.
Yeah, that's a great, great story. I remember the first time Gary came into the organization, he said, listen, I need a day minimally. Do you have some business analysis professionals we can work with? And well, there's Jared and there's Susan and there's Scott and there's, like there's a whole, but it was really, he needed to understand, well, how do these processes work? At what point and what are the triggers that I'm looking for? How do I see that in the data? Because he can't understand any of that, he doesn't know where it's coming from, right? It's a great story. Let's talk about redesigning workflows, Reethu, because this was a really big thing. And so often this is where the ROI shifts radically, right? Is when you take that data and that understanding and you push it back in and you're able to change the business itself, either to make it more durable in the producing of the data or actioning it into the business. It's a great story.
Absolutely. So this is when you sort of get the feedback of what you've been working through, and the enterprise also identifies the whole exercise to be a step in the right direction. So as part of us redesigning the workflows back at Max, we switched to a system where we had a daily report generated based on our inbound products, our outbound products, what products were returned, what products earned complaints, not earned, but got a lot of complaints. So we had like a snapshot of every day this way. And when you put together many days and you map them together, you will have a clear trend. And this we felt would sort of give us a quick insight into how well the business is doing, what is the process health like. And this was not something that we were doing prior to this. And this was a new practice that we adopted. Also, we included a new KPI into our dashboard. It is called service level, and it is nothing but the probability of us being able to service an order. So we were able to make an improvement in it, and that's one of the more happier results that I achieved, that we achieved as a team, rather.
It's a great story. And then to me, the one that was really hit was this whole shift in leadership and culture. I want to do more, right? And let's just talk to that as we close out, because I want to come back, like Robin, you asked the questions, if the executives aren't committed, nothing makes them more committed than success, right? Seeing how this begins to shift the business. And then people, remember that Boeing quote at the beginning? It was like, people start to visualize what it can do and it fosters more. And now you're into this flywheel thing, right? Reethu, do you want to just finish off with the story here?
Absolutely. Totally agree with Keith on what he added. So the executives had so much more faith, so much more engagement in this whole BDA exercise, and they wanted to do more. Apart from stocking, we had issues with collecting payments. Our cash-to-cash cycles did not look too good. So now that our experiment looked more or less successful, they were excited to extend this initiative into other areas like payment and handling cash and our finances as well. And it clearly, success is what creates a very strong buy-in to future initiatives in the BDA space. And I would conclude by saying we found a few interesting things with the BDA lens. And I feel it is something that all enterprises have to adopt, big or small.
It's a great story. So can we all agree, solid win? Like, to me, this is a big one, right? Because, like, Reethu is using strong business analysis, understanding to execute on this. It was all about the business analysis layer. Nothing to do with the data science. The data science is part of it, but it's about strong focus on what is value in here. Let's really get behind the covers and understand the root cause. Let's understand where this data is coming from. And when somebody does that, guess what happens to the ROI? 3 times the ROI, right? Huge. The laggards are only getting 19%, which is not bad, actually. But let's go down through the checklist. You know, it's quite simply, this is so important. You know, if you use business analysis more, you end up feeling also that there's this demand. The demand for this skill far outstrips the supply. It builds that demand for more people to do this. Overall, the high performers are getting so much higher ROI. Why? Because they're doing what they did here with Reethu. She was in charge. She drove it, ran it end to end to really drive this whole thing. And guess what happened, right? And then that drives more demand for the profession. So to me, this is an amazing story. And hopefully what we've done today is we've talked about the impact of business data analytics on today's business and what does it mean to be data driven. I hope people have some great stories that you can take back and talk about and share with the executive, because how often have you wanted to have something that you could share with your executive to just prove how valuable you are as a professional? That'd be kind of nice once in a while, right? Well, if you've got that now in front of you in this area of business data analytics, it's like, this is what happens. And then how critical is the role of business analysis in being data driven? Who voted 11 out of 10? Susan, there you go. It's that important, right? Because if you don't do it, there's the failure rate is so much higher, the ROI is so much lower, the skills tend to be wrong, and it tends to be more of a data-centric thing, or it tends to be more of a sciencey thing, because companies end up blowing away hundreds of millions of dollars in this area, right? Because they're not focused on what is the right business question, what's the value to the business of that answer, right? And then Reethu, I love the story. I just think it's a phenomenal story of you picking it up and just adapting good business analysis practice to drive through a business result that's just so important to everybody, right? And I really appreciate everybody's participation. I thought we'd ask and answer questions. We've been picking them up as we go, but
Thank you so much, Keith. It's been a great discussion so far.
It's been a great discussion. I'm still hung up on the Keith is handsome thing, which was the beginning of the whole. Oh my gosh, just having fun with that. It's good. Can I bring it back to you, Holly? And thank you so much for inviting Reethu and myself and Susan to the event tonight. And I hope people enjoyed the session,
Thank you, Keith, and thank you very much, Reethu and Susan, for bringing this into a lot of insights and a lot of information and valuable information and inspiration for all the BAs to become more the people that drive the data culture in their organization. So really echo that. And also as a Vancouver chapter, we want to exemplify a good BAs in the data-driven culture. So we call out for all the members to keep us accountable, because for our strategies and initiatives, we have measures to measure our success. So keep an eye on that, make sure we keep our promise and keep us accountable. And I really also want to kudos to Reethu, and she's a volunteer for the IAB Vancouver chapter, and she actually helped us to conduct the membership engagement survey and had that produce the dashboard for us that really give us some insights in how well we serve our members. So now we're going to have another survey pretty soon in 2022. If you want to help IAB Vancouver chapter to become with this data-driven culture, I would like to ask you to submit the survey. So because that's one way to use the data to help us to understand your needs, how we can serve you better.